Hi guys, welcome back to a page in the chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and it is time to talk through my March wrap up. I read 10 books in the month of March, which is not bad considering it felt like I was in a reading slump for a lot of March. I found some books that are definitely favourites, also found some books that I would never recommend and hated. And yeah, today we're going to talk through all of the books that I read in March. Numbers wise, it was good, and like when I think about some of the new favorites that I read, I'm like, yeah, okay, it was good. But then overall, and during March, it didn't feel like a particularly positive reading experience. I wasn't excited to read. I felt really slumpy. It felt like I was having more misses than hits, and I'm very happy to kind of be out of March now, be over March, and be properly into spring, and I don't know, just better vibes. Hopefully it is a million steps forward now and no steps back. So if you guys like seeing wrap-ups and review videos and things like that, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below. Stay tuned for future content. I upload every single Wednesday and every single Sunday, so there's no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. Also, do please feel free to check me out on Bookstagram at Page in Chapter for up-to-date behind the scenes, what I'm reading, how I'm reviewing it, so you don't have to wait for these monthly wrap-up videos. You can just see it in real time. And without further ado, let's get on into all the books I read in March. So I started the month off with a series continuation, but also not really because they are interconnected standalones, so not really a continuation, but also for me it was because I'd read the first one. I'm rambling too much about this. That is Scarred by Emily McIntyre. This is book 2 in the Never After series. These are dark romantasy books based on fairy tale retellings. So this one follows our main character Tristan Farsa, and he is a prince and his brother is the king of this kingdom, and his brother is betrothed to our main character Sarah, and Tristan and Sarah end up really hitting it off. They have quite the connection, but these are dark romantasies. You need to look up the trigger warnings for these, and our main character is not a particularly pleasant person to be around. If you are the kind of person that likes he's murdered someone, that's really sexy kind of vibes, then this is probably for you. There's no real nuance to his murdering. He gets angry and he kills someone, and that's that. Sarah finds that hot, and that, they're just doing their thing. These are just kind of fun, easy to read, kind of trashy books. I do enjoy having the options to pick them up on my shelves. They're good for when I'm just wanting something a little bit silly, but you definitely don't go into these expecting the peak of literature. And I also don't go into them expecting to like the characters very much. I never really do. And to be honest, I forgot that I read this, and I don't have much to say about it because I don't really remember much. It didn't evoke much feeling. So definitely not a bad one to pick up. I would recommend this series. Again, if you like dark romantasies, if you like retellings, if you just want something kind of trashy and easy to read, then I do think these are good options. They're just not my personal favorites, and definitely not ones that stay with you for very long. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I will be continuing with this series. This will not be the last one of these books that you see in a wrap-up video. Just make sure that you know what you're gonna get when you go into these, which is dark romance, lots of trigger warnings, lots of main characters who kill people for no valid reason other than I wanted to, and sometimes that is a vibe. The next book that I picked up was actually a reread, which I don't feel like I do very much rereading. It's hard to motivate myself to reread a book, but I did this month and I really enjoyed it, and that was Heartless by Elsie Silver. This was the first series where I read on Kindle and then enjoyed it so much that I actually went and bought physical copies. So my reread was of the physical copy, which is how I could convince myself to reread it, really, because I was reading it in a different form, so it felt like a different read. But this is book 2 in the Chestnut Spring series. It is my favorite one in the Chestnut Spring series, which is interesting because it has a trope that I don't typically enjoy. In fact, it has 2 tropes that I don't typically enjoy, but this one it just does it so excellently. In this book we follow Cade Eaton, and he has a young son and he desperately needs a nanny. He needs help, but he's not happy with any of the nannies he finds. He doesn't think any of them are particularly qualified to handle his son. He's kind of a helicopter parent, and also a lot of the women in this small town want to be a nanny for him, so just to try and like ensnare him, and he's not really interested in that. Enter Willa Grant, who is Summer's friend from book 1, and Summer basically convinces Cade to hire Willa to take care of his son. Willa is suddenly free for the summer, she suddenly doesn't have plans, so she moves in with Cade in order to look after his son, which just an absolutely amazing series of events just unfolds. I think the romance in this book is so strong. You really believe that these two characters are good for each other. You really feel the connection between them, like from the get-go. It really jumps off the page and makes you really root for these characters. But even taking the romance out of it, this is just fun. Like, the series of events and the plot of this book is just fun. And yeah, I give this 5 stars. It's my favourite in the Chestnut Spring series, and I don't know anyone who has read this book and isn't like, Danny Cade is it. So if you're considering reading any of the books in the Chestnut Spring series, then I think this is it for you. And also bear in mind that I am not a fan of single dad romances, but I still gave this 5 stars and have reread it, which is a pretty big accomplishment on this book's part. So don't feel concerned if you aren't a huge fan of single dad romances, because I do actually think this does it really, really well. I adore this book so much. I then picked up a kind of like highly anticipated like book for me. Not highly anticipated enough that I went out and bought it on release day or anything like that, but I was really excited about the arrival of this book so that I could read it, and that is The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. I was chasing the high of Bride. I still feel a little like book hungover from Bride, and this really helped cure the symptoms a little bit, because this is contemporary romance meets fantasy romance, and that we have main characters who are werewolves and they are also both doctors, and because their schedules don't really allow for dating, and Mackenzie is tired of her family constantly being on her about being in a relationship and getting married and things like that, so she lies and says that she has a boyfriend, and when they ask for his name, the only name that jumps to mind is of the very hot, very grumpy head cardiologist at the hospital that she works at, and he ends up entering into this arrangement because he is an alpha, and alphas aren't viewed particularly well this world, and he is scared of losing his position at this hospital if they fire him for finding out that he is an alpha. So he lies and says that he is mated to Mackenzie because mated alphas are seen to be more tame and more in control, and therefore he won't lose his job. And I saw someone say that this book is The Love Hypothesis meets Bride, and they kind of hit the nail on the head there. This is exactly what that is. I think if we are comparing it to Bride, which is maybe not entirely fair on this book, but also they are very similar concepts and meshing of genres that came out very close together, so I think it's fair play to compare them. I think Bride did have better world building. There is more of a fantasy emphasis in Bride. You have the different like factions that live in their different areas, and there's like more of a plot outside of the romance in Bride, whereas this, which, you know, it could be a pro, it could be a con. For me, it was just a difference because I like both. You might like this more if you are looking for a contemporary romance that has a werewolf element to it. You know, like this is just focused on their relationship. They are essentially kind of like two normal people who happen to be werewolves meeting and falling in love. There's not a huge like emphasis on world building or fantasy or other creatures outside of these two characters. And I don't think that is a bad thing. It was just a little bit different to Bride, and that might be something that you like more. Also, the thing that's in Bride that kind of got everyone talking about Bride, that thing, the fan fiction thing, that's also in this, so I can kind of see why these two are lumped together. And also kind of weird that 2 books randomly got published at the same time that have that by like different authors. I don't know, kind of strange to me. But I did really enjoy this book. I believe I gave it 4 stars. It really did help with my slump, and I would really like to see a lot more of this like contemporary romance meets fantasy romance kind of hybrid genre that has kind of been created through Bride and The Fake Mate. I would very much like to read more of it. It really felt like a fun way to read. Again, these are a little bit trashy, a little bit cringy, but I find them really, really fun and would recommend them. And especially if you liked Bride, then I do think you will really enjoy this. It definitely doesn't feel like a B-Tech version of Bride. I think it's actually just a really fun example of this hybrid genre, and I would really recommend it. I then picked up, I still don't feel over this. Like, I still cannot believe the way this ended. The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is book 2 in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Like, the way this ended. Talk about cliffhanger. I also also didn't see it coming at all. Like, I was just on the sofa and it happened and I went, like, I did not see it coming here out of nowhere. And I really enjoyed this. I actually enjoyed this more than the first book. So in this series we follow our main character Evangeline, and when the boy that she is in love with decides to marry her stepsister, she absolutely cannot believe that this is the case. Like, she has so much belief in fairy tales that she kind of believes this boy is her Prince Charming, and there's just absolutely no way that they are not meant to be together. So she goes to Jax, who is the fate of hearts, fate of broken hearts, fate of love, etc, etc, and she makes a deal with him in order to stop the wedding. And in the first book we see what this deal entails and where it takes her, and the chaos that that leads to, and the fun little like fairy tale vibes, honestly. And then this book picks up exactly where we left off in the last book, but we follow Evangeline as she has become a lot more distrustful of Jax, and she's become a lot more distrustful of the world. I would still say as a character she is still very optimistic and still really believes in true love and happily ever afters, which I really enjoyed seeing actually. I think it's very sweet that she still believes that. And we see her as she is kind of forced to interact with Jax again. Like, she doesn't trust him and she doesn't really want to, but she has her reasons that kind of drag her back into his orbit, and we really see a lot more character development of Jax in this book, which is what makes it my favourite. He as a character is so well-rounded, and he's not a particularly nice character. In fact, he's actually kind of the villain of this series, but his reasoning and the duplicity of him is so well written, and particularly for a YA, which is why I ended up loving this book more than Once Upon a Broken Heart. And I cannot wait to see what A Curse for True Love brings. The chaos that is just good. I don't know if I'm ever ready for this series to end, to be honest with you. I will always need more Jax in my life. Kind of hoping the third book makes me understand why people like Apollo, because I do not like Apollo. I'm on a Jax train forever. But I absolutely adored this book, which is strange because I don't feel like I enjoy young adult novels that much, and this feels very young adult. It is a very, very whimsical story. It very much leans into the young adultness of it all, and it also very much leans into this fairy tale-esque story, and it tells a fairy tale-esque story as if it is a fairy tale. It just makes for such easy reading. It really sucks you in, and I cannot wait to read the next one. I realised I said that I read some terrible books this month, but I've only given positive reviews so far, so maybe I was wrong about that, because it actually seems like it was a pretty good reading month. I then read To Ruin a Duke by Tessa Brookman. I found this on Kindle Unlimited. I was hoping for a Regency romance that would drag me out of my slump, that would just kind of launch me into a Regency romance like mood, and I would just burn through a load of Regency romances. This is kind of branded as a age gap, like steamy historical romance, and I did very much vlog my full thoughts on this, but I gave this 1 star. I thought this was a terrible example of a Regency romance. The first 50% of the book is pretty much only focused on relationship development, but the way the relationship development goes does not feel very Regency romance, and I very much critiqued this book for having characters that aren't Regency, and there was no need for this to be a Regency romance. Like, you could have just removed that aspect and it wouldn't have mattered. Also, the age gap. No point saying this is an age gap romance, because ages aren't mentioned at all in this book, and there is nothing to suggest that there is an age gap here. Maybe the mention that the Duke has been married before is the only real sign that, okay, he may be older than her, but again, it has no real bearing on the plot. It doesn't come up again. They never talk about it between the two of them. It literally does not matter at all. In the last 50% of this book, the Regency comes in a little bit more, but there's just like random plot points happening that haven't really been set up at all. It's like a romance story and then a plot-driven story. And I said in my review that I feel like this was the general idea for a Regency romance, just written as a running stream of consciousness, and that was just put out there. That's very much how this feels. And the thing that drove me to no end is you have a villain of this story who does a very, very strange, weird, horrible thing as a villain, and then there's no reason why, and there's no punishment for him for this. Like, it is like, I don't understand why even put it in if you're not going to actually follow through with it and end it out. I gave this book 1 star. I would not recommend this. I don't plan on reading any more of this author's other books. Didn't enjoy it, didn't recommend it. Save yourself the time. Don't do what I did. This is not a great example of a regency. It's not a great example of an age gap. It's not a great example of a romance, to be honest, because these two characters should not have been together. They spent the whole book talking about how they couldn't wait to change each other, and I just don't see how that is supposed to be romantic in any way. Oh, and there's also like no smut in this book. The smut happens at the 99% mark. It is the last page, the last very last thing to happen in this book, which just makes it feel very rushed. Doesn't really add anything to the actual relationship development or plot development, and it just feels like it was thrown in at the end just for the sake of saying that there is smut in this book. Because if it is the last page, how is that driving the story forward? What is the point in it whatsoever? So yeah, I have a lot of negatives about this book. I don't think there are any positives, and I don't think anybody out there would enjoy this book. This was like my new favorite book. I am absolutely obsessed with The Crimson Moth, or The Heartless Hunter for any US folks watching. I don't know why it has a different name between the US and the UK, but I am obsessed with this book. It is so good. Everybody go out and read this right now. If there is any book you take from me, it should be this one. This is so good. So this follows our main character Rune, and she is a witch existing in a time period where witches are persecuted by the republic that they are living in. It used to be run by witches, and then the republic overthrew the witches, killed the queen witches, and are now hunting out witches. And they basically, in order to find a witch, they strip them naked and they see if they have the marks of spellcraft on them, which are like little silvery scars, because the magic system in this is very detailed, but it's essentially based on blood magic. And we have our main character Rune, who is not only trying to exist as this flighty socialite whilst hiding the fact that she is a witch, she also dons an alter ego of the Crimson Moth of a nighttime to go out and try and rescue these persecuted witches and help them try to escape capture and flee the country. And then we have Gideon, who is the darling witch hunter of the Republic. He believes so strongly in the cause of persecuting witches, and he is essentially who Rune is trying to undermine. But when intelligence suggests that Rune may be the Crimson Moth, Gideon decides to pretend to court her so that he can try to find information about whether she is the Crimson Moth that he has been hunting. This is like hunter becomes the hunted kind of thing. It is so good. The witch hunter vibes are incredible. It is so well done, and the world building and magic system as well is absolutely amazing. I cannot wait for the next book in this series. I am so eager to get my hands on it. If this book has no fans, then I am dead kind of vibes. I love this so much. Gave it 5 stars. Would give it like 600 stars if I could. It was so captivating. The romance elements were just, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and I just loved that there was so much suspicion between them. Like, they kind of worked out what the other one was doing, and so it made that line of, is this real, is this not real, so hazy. And they knew that. Like, Rune kind of worked out why Gideon was courting her. Gideon kind of worked out that she had worked out why he was courting her. It was a very, I know that you know, but you don't know that I know kind of vibe, and it was so good. And I have literally given this book like pride of place on my bookshelf. It is facing out like this. Like, I love this book. I will be starting a shrine for Crimson Moth the way I have for Fourth Wing. And I'll be honest, after reading that book, I didn't think anything could really come close to it. I then picked up The Unmaking of June Faroh by Adrienne Young. This was the first Adrienne Young I'd ever read, and I was quite nervous for it. I didn't know what to expect from this. I knew that this was a magical realism. I knew that we follow our main character June Faroh as the women in her family have died, and she has been left kind of all alone, and she is trying to put the pieces together of why the Faroh women are cursed and why they go out the way they do. Basically, the 2 Faroh women that we know of, June's mother and June's grandmother, have both suffered from the same illness and died in the same way, and June has been told that this is a curse that the Faroh women must bear. We follow her as she tries to get to the bottom of what is actually going on here, and this leads her on a very wonderful adventure. There is a romance subplot to this, and it is such a good story. I was so pleasantly surprised by it. I did end up giving it 4 stars because I felt like the ending was a tiny bit of a cop-out. Like, not the actual events of the ending themselves. I would have been happy with how that went. I just think a little bit more could have been done with it. I'm trying not to give spoilers here, but essentially it feels like there is a character who is also trying to work out what is going on along with June Faroh, and then when he finds out, he kind of just lets it go. And I wish that he hadn't quite so much, and it wasn't just a okay, cool, thanks, like I'm off now. Like, I wish it had a little bit more of a bearing on the ending of the book. But I did really enjoy this. It evoked a lot of feelings in me, and I would really recommend this. I actually did then go and buy Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I have every intention of continuing to read Adrienne Young books, because this was so excellently written. The world building aspect of this, or like the magic system aspect, was so seamlessly and beautifully built. I was trying to explain to the people in my life like what is going on in this book so that I could talk about it, and they were getting so confused by me trying to explain what was going on, at which point I realized that this is an incredibly complicated and confusing subject, but it's written so seamlessly. And because you are following June, who is also discovering this at the same time that we are, it's just revealed to you so excellently that it doesn't feel complicated or confusing or overwhelming when you're reading it. It's just when you actually think about it and try to explain it to somebody else that you become so overwhelmed. And I think that's just such a mark of incredible writing, that you can do a concept this confusing. So yeah, the magical realism was excellent. I already want to reread this book, and I'm wondering if maybe I should have given it a 4.5 or a 5 stars now, because I'm feeling so like hyped up about this book now I'm talking to you about it. And yeah, I really liked June as a character, and I don't know, I wish that I had rooted for the romance a little bit more. So I do think it is worth mentioning that the romance element is very much a subplot, and I do wish that I had seen just a little bit more. Like, I think this book is excellent, and it's very short considering how complicated it is. I think it does a wonderful job of telling the story in a very short way. I just like personally wish, because I loved this book so much, like, can I have more? Like, just so that I can really dive into the romance or really dive into the magic system that's going on here. Like, I want more. So yeah, I would actually really recommend this. This is not a normal book for me to read at all. I was very confused about how I was feeling about it, because it's just so not what I would normally read. But it was really nice to pick up something a little bit different, and it made me feel really good about my reading that week. I then essentially was missing my queen, Elsie Silver, and I wanted more Elsie Silver, and we're not too far away from Wild Love being released now, but at the time it felt ages away and I didn't know what to do, so I decided to read the Gold Rush Ranch series. I was really nervous about this. I did not think it could be anywhere near as good as Chestnut Springs. I just was very hesitant. I'd heard good things about this series, but I just didn't see how I could like it nearly as much. And this is a really good series. I really enjoy it, actually. I think there are elements to this that I enjoy more. I think the family elements of Chestnut Springs and the characters themselves I probably prefer in Chestnut Springs, but I like the setup in the Gold Rush Ranch series more, because essentially we are following horse girls. We are following a like racehorse farm, and in this first book we follow our main character Billy, and she's up and coming as a horse trainer, and she is invited to come to Gold Rush Ranch and take a job here. But Vaughn, who has just taken over the ranch for his grandfather, is very skeptical of Billy. He does not like her. He thinks she's, I don't know, too mouthy and too pretty, and just she's not what he expected, and he's not happy about it. So he gives Billy the most challenging horse that they have, because he expects her to fail. And we follow Billy as she is working with this racehorse and trying to get him to like people and trying to really draw the best out of him, whilst also dealing with Vaughn, who does not like her. Yes, the kind of like enemies to lovers of these two is really fun, and I just loved the horse element. I then went and bought the horse pack on The Sim so that I could continue to get these vibes outside of my reading. I really enjoyed the setup to this, and I think the conflict in this book as well just made a lot of sense. And I really loved that we had two characters who had gone through very similar things and similar upbringings, but who had learnt to deal with them in very different ways. and that is kind of what causes the conflict in this book, and I thought it was very clever and I really enjoyed it. So if you are hesitant to start the Gold Rush Ranch series because you just don't think it could be as good as Chestnut Springs, I can assure you that it is still Elsie Silver. It still feels like Elsie Silver. This is honestly a really good series and a great way to get some more Elsie Silver in your life. So definitely go and pick it up if you enjoyed Chestnut Springs and you want some more. I did also pick up book 2. I didn't read these 2 back to back, but I think I may as well talk to them back to back. Book 2 is Off to the Races, and I really wanted to get to this one because this is Violet's story. Violet being Violet Eaton, the sister of the brothers in the Chestnut Springs series. So this is her book and how we are kind of properly introduced and the foundations are laid for the Chestnut Springs series to start, and I really enjoyed this. Violet is not who I was expecting. Cole, her love interest, is not who I was expecting, but it works so well. So Violet is the jockey of the horse that Billy is training in book 1, and she kind of lands into the job. Like, she's not particularly trained for it. She essentially is just put on this horse by Billy and off she goes. And then she meets Vaughn's brother, Cole, and these two realize that they have actually had like an online relationship and they know each other from speaking online, but that kind of ended badly. So we follow them as they are just trying to get through working around each other unscathed. Cole has now had to come and stay at Gold Rush Ranch in order to get some business done. These two are forced to spend a lot of time together. Tropes wise, this is a forced proximity second chance romance, and I really enjoy it. I do think Cole he's a bit whiny and a bit annoying, but intentionally so, and he really gets called out on that by Violet. He's not annoyingly whiny, it's just what he gets called out on, and he is a very well-rounded character, and he's also a character that is in therapy, which I always enjoy. Like, he's grumpy and he has his problems, but at least he is working on them, and he's not just working on them because of Violet either, which I enjoy. Like, he decided for himself to go to therapy and work on it before the story starts, and I really enjoy these two. It's like Violet is the only one that Cole can be himself around, and who really softens him up and shows him that he needs to just kind of grow up and deal with the shit he's gone through. And I really loved these two. I would happily take more Violet and Cole, and I'm looking forward to seeing like them as background characters in the next few books. So yeah, Gold Rush Ranch is honestly just a great series. I would probably recommend, if you are uncertain, I would go into a photo finish before Off to the Races. I mean, I would always recommend reading in order, but I just think because Violet is obviously Violet Eaton, who we have seen multiple times in the Chestnut Spring series, it might be kind of nicer to ease your way in from that point, because you have already been introduced to Violet and you might already want to see her romance. Really enjoyed those two. Would probably give them both 3.5, 4 stars, I think, so highly recommend. And then the final book that I am going to talk to you about, I read in between the Elsie Silver books, and that is A Fragile Enchantment by Alison Saft. I was really excited about this because this is a young adult, like, Regency fantasy. We follow our main character Neve, and she is a tailor, but she has the ability to stitch like moods into her clothes. So she is brought to the Kingdom of Avaland to make the clothes for the royal wedding that is about to happen between Prince Christopher and his betrothed from another land. And we follow Neve and Christopher as they are forced to spend a lot of time together, and they don't really get along. Neve really forces Christopher to understand more about the world that he is living in. Christopher has his own problems, but he has been living quite a sheltered existence, and Neve is not afraid to really put him in his place about that. And I will say that this story is very diverse. There is a lot of bisexual characters in this book, so I haven't really read that in a young adult like fantasy romance before, and I thought that was a really like interesting aspect, and I loved the diversity. But I did end up giving this book 2 stars because it just kind of sucked. There's all of this like political intrigue and political backgrounds and rebellions and things like that going on, and then none of it gets solved. The whole book is supposed to center around Neve and Kit as they try to find a solution for him marrying this woman he doesn't want to marry, so that these two can be together. And the story kind of ends without them really fixing any of the problems that have been brought up. The like resolution to the story is, okay, we'll fix it later. And I didn't love that. I didn't really understand the point in it. And I was also very confused about the motivations of these characters. There's also like a Bridgerton aspect of this in that there's like a columnist who's writing like very critical things about the elite and the royal family particularly, and Neve is very against this person even though they are on the same side and they want the same things, and I didn't really get it. So I felt like this story needed some refining, and there were some plot holes that I just couldn't get past, and I'm not someone who particularly notices plot holes. I am not that good of a reader, but I really did notice them in this. I just felt like the motivations for the actions of these characters were all over the place and didn't really make any sense, and I think could have been thought through a little bit more to make sure that it made sense why characters were doing these things. Yeah, to me it just didn't. I felt like Neve was just on a side that she shouldn't have really been on, and it didn't make much sense to me. So I ended up giving this 2 stars because it was actually a struggle for me to read it, and I was just begging for it to be over by like the 60% mark. Unfortunately, I would not recommend this book. Obviously there are people out there who really did enjoy it, and maybe I'm just not the right age for it. I'm not sure. After the Crimson Moth and Once Upon a Broken Heart, I thought maybe it was time to give young adult like more of a try, and this kind of reminded me of everything I don't like about the young adult genre as an adult. Yeah, I was really hopeful about this because I thought like a Bridgerton style fantasy could have been really good, and the magic system in this was really interesting. I did love how her ability to sew emotions into clothes was built into such a big thing and made like a difference on the plot and the romance, and I did really enjoy that. I just wish it, like the actual plot could have been better. Like this, everything was just let down by the plot for me, because I thought characters and magic system and all of that were really good, and even the world building and the political element, that was all really good. Just didn't like the actual plot and how everything played out, unfortunately. So here are all of the books that I read in the month of March. Now that I've actually talked it through, I think that this was a very positive reading month. I read a lot of books that I really enjoyed. I will admit that some of the books that I didn't enjoy to such an extent that it like put me in a mood. But overall, I would say this was a very positive experience. I would recommend a lot of the books on this list. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the books that I read were also fairy loot books. I do read other things. But yeah, I feel like it was a good month. I also feel like I've been talking for a while. So if you guys do enjoy wrap-ups, if you read any of these books and also enjoyed them or have thoughts on them, then do please let me know, and also do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I would love to have a little chat about some of these books. I hope you guys also had a great month of reading in March. Do like let me know any of your favorites from the month. Maybe I can add them to my want to read list if there's anything that wasn't already on my radar. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you enjoy everything you are reading, and there are no reading slumps in your future. And I will see you for my next video. Bye guys.